Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Fleet Geeks podcast. I'm delighted that you've joined me today for today's episode. I'm going to be talking about why I think the industry guidance should be version controlled and probably why it isn't. So, as many of you will have seen recent comms come through from the Office of the Traffic Commissioner around daily walk-around checks, reaffirming all of that good practice that the DVSA have already told us around driver walk-around checks. But there's a couple of interesting additions to that document when it originally came out, which was later edited 10 days later. One of which that stood out to me was around drivers using a tyre pressure gauge to monitor tyre pressure as part of the daily walk-around check. Quite interesting, really, I suppose, is that, and that sort of got me thinking along the lines of, certainly in my peer group, we were having a conversation around, well, why aren't these documents version controlled so we can see where they come from? An old frustration for me, for example, is the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. New versions come out and you have to read it all. You don't really know exactly what it is that's been edited necessarily, because there isn't a tight version control process for it like that you would have with an ISO 9001, for example. So I just wanted to explore that on today's podcast, really, around why I think the guidance should be version controlled and probably why it isn't. But there's sort of 8 real reasons for me that I think version control for documentation is really important. And one of them is clarity. So the first thing is clarity. Having a version control means that you don't end up, and this is useful learning for you guys as well, for those of you that don't version control documents. It's just a really important process, good business practice for us to follow, good compliance practice to follow with version control, because it creates clarity. Just today in my business, we were looking at an audit document for health and safety consultancy work, and there wasn't clarity around which one was the most recent one. It was down to one person knew which that was. Now, that's not ideal. We need to make it really clear what the real one, the genuine current version is. So the first reason is clarity. We need to all make sure that we use the latest version, and past versions are still preserved and we take the learnings from them, but ultimately we have the latest version only available to us. The second really important reason is that it creates an audit trail, which then has accountability. So each edit is linked to the person who's done it. There's a timestamp of what's been done. And compliance heavy sectors like ours, we need to know where the paper trail's gone. We need to know that the audit and accountability behind where it's been previously. The third is that we can collaborate without overwriting. So, when several people can contribute to a document, and actually there's a risk of losing each other's work. So particularly in draft stage, it's really important to make sure we have version controls of the drafts with a record of what's been changed, because that's really good practice for us to be able to know exactly it. So many times, and those of you that are consultants that are listening to this, how many times have you issued documentation to your clients, and then they've come back with an edit, come back with another edit, come back with another edit, and before you know it, you're unsure what version you're on and who's edited what, and actually all of a sudden you're editing the edits, and that means you're going around in circles. I've certainly learned the hard way with that. When you start editing the edits, one person, you submit one version and someone edits it or wants an edit to it, so you edit it, and then all of a sudden the other person wants to edit it back, and all of a sudden you're just going round and round in circles. So that's really important. The fourth one is around error recovery. So if someone deletes a section, adds some incorrect data, we can always restore an old version, and that reduces the risk of any accidental permanent mistakes. Okay, so that's really important for you as well. It also helps transparency. So the fifth reason is transparency in decision making. So if we see how a document's evolved, what's been added, what's been removed, what's approved, and at what stage, it makes it much easier to justify the final wording and making sure that the final version is the correct one. The sixth is time savings. So that cuts down on this ping pong. Can you send me the latest copy? Speeds up review and sign off process. So there is some efficiency savings as well when it comes to making sure that we document control and version control our documents.
Hi, I'm Shani from Flagship Partners. We're proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast, your go-to source for all things fleet management. If you're looking for expert advice or high-quality training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We're also thrilled to announce the launch of our Fleet Academy, designed to support and develop future fleet leaders through expert-led and career-focused training. Our offering includes fully accredited courses such as the Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher courses, OLAT training, plus ongoing mentoring, support and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is simple: to develop elite fleet professionals who drive excellence across the industry. Let's shape the future of our fleet management together.
The final one is it helps support remote and hybrid teams. So when people aren't working together, we can co-author documents at the same time. The final one is around professionalism and trust. Clients, auditors, regulators, having a well-managed document process builds confidence. It helps make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. Okay. So that's 8 clear reasons why version control of documents is good and better than not version controlling. We get clarity. There's an audit trail. We can enable us to collaborate effectively. It improves error recovery, includes transparency in decision making. Time savings are improved, supports remote and hybrid teams, and finally, it includes professionalism and trust. Now, I was reflecting on how did this document come out? Who proofread it, and how was it proofread to enable that lack of clarity to be properly published? And what's the what's the cause there? What are the issues? So there's a couple of reasons probably why the documentation or the communications from the OTC and DVSA aren't necessarily version controlled. Now, sometimes with the guide to maintaining roadworthiness, there's minor, where it says there's been an edit, it might give you minor information about what's been edited, but it doesn't give you the full detail, and there's certainly not any version control. So legacy government systems is one of the issues. So usually, often the updates are like one-shot versions. So once they're published, a correction or revision is possible, but it means posting a new file and just saying the new file's been posted. And I suppose that the other issue is that the role of the OTC and government is enforcement and instruction, and not necessarily co-authoring with us as an industry. So communications are directives rather than collaborative documents, and that means they're less likely to want to version control the previous history, because the directive just makes it really clear that this is the version you're following and this is what you're doing. So I think that might be a challenge, but it might be resource and technology, for example. But I think there's an element of risk aversion. So, for example, if there's too many versions of a communication, there is a possibility that it could confuse operators. So instead of that, we issue updates or revised guidance as a whole new notice, rather than necessarily tracking or showing the tracked changes. And I understand that risk aversion. I think I do. I do understand that we need to make sure that the communication is really clear. The issue is it makes our life those of us working in the industry, it makes it quite hard for us to really understand what's changed unless you have the previous version and the new version. And essentially, whenever a new version of a document comes out, me and my team are busy trying to work out what's changed, what's new, what's different, because we've been working to a previous version of the documentation. So in my opinion, I think it'd make my life, for example, a lot easier if, rather than just issuing updates or revised guidance, we had a really clear version of the different changes and why they've been changed as well, what the thought process is. But obviously it's unlikely, it's unlikely for anyone to want to admit that maybe they made a mistake or something wasn't proofread properly and that kind of thing, which obviously is a human error. These things happen. But I think it's important, and the reason I raise this is I think it's important as an industry that we put pressure on the regulators to say, actually, this is something we want. We want to have version control. I would like us to have version control. I don't know what other people think. And if you're behind me, please do drop a comment or let me know. But certainly it's something that I speak about regularly with other consultants in the industry. And we would be big advocates for making sure that things are version controlled, because it just helps aid that visibility and understanding of why something's been edited the way it is, rather than just saying, there's a revised guidance and it's been revised for clarity, which I think is the words that are used currently. Revised for clarity. Well, it'd be interesting if point 1.1 has been revised for clarity, previous wording unclear. At least we know exactly where we're heading to. We can just review previous version, current version, and how it's changed. I just think that'd be really, really worthwhile. So like I said, I think as an industry, it'd be really beneficial for us to advocate for those benefits of document control. It's certainly expected of us as operators, as consultants, to provide version control. Certainly, it's something we do with our courses that we write as part of being ISO 9001 accredited. We need to make sure we demonstrate that version control. And I just think, whilst I understand that the industry guidance isn't, and probably isn't because it, for ease of clarity, that essentially you're only working by the current document, I do think that it'd be really helpful for many of us to be able to see the version control process and why it's gone through those changes with the reasoning behind it. I just think that extra visibility would be really worthwhile, but also it would help encourage and ensure that things were proofread properly and effectively before being put out to the industry. I think that's also very important. No one's perfect. I've certainly drafted policies and communications which are far from perfect in my time. I'm not claiming that anyone does need to be perfect, but one of the things we will do is address where it's gone wrong. I think that increases psychological safety. I think it's beneficial. It increases transparency. So, if I don't try to hide from the errors or the improved versions of things that we're doing, I think it's good for everyone to be held to the same standard. So that's my update for today. This is why industry guidance, I think, should be version controlled. There's lots of reasons that I've given why we should be version controlling documents, both as an industry and you guys listening as transport managers, as fleet managers. I think it's important to version control documents, and probably a few reasons why it may not be. And I do understand those, but nonetheless, here I am wanting to put a little bit of pressure on, because I think as an industry we should advocate for version control on the guidance. I think it'd be worthwhile. I think it'd add clarity. I think it'd add accountability, and I think it'd help us understand why different changes have been made and where. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'll see you on the next one.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.